Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, by Robert M. Sapolsky. Introduction. Imagine for a moment that you're a zebra, peacefully grazing on the vast, sun-drenched plains of the African savanna. The biggest worry on your mind is finding the next patch of tasty grass. Suddenly, from the corner of your eye, you see a flash of gold. A lion. In less than a second, your world changes. Your body explodes into action. A cascade of powerful hormones floods your system. Your heart hammers against your ribs, pumping fuel to your muscles. Your breathing becomes rapid and shallow, pulling in as much oxygen as possible. Every non-essential system shuts down. Digestion? Forget it. Growth? Not a priority. Your immune system? Takes a backseat. The only thing that matters in this moment is survival. You are a biological marvel, a perfectly tuned machine built for one purpose: to run for your life. And you do. You sprint, you dodge, you escape. A few minutes later, the threat is gone. And here is the most incredible part: your body returns to normal. The storm of hormones subsides. Your heart rate slows. You go right back to grazing, your mind once again focused on that next patch of grass. The crisis is over. For the zebra, stress is a short-term, life-or-death emergency. Now, imagine you're a human. You're sitting in your car, stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic. You're going to be late for a meeting. Your boss might be angry. You start thinking about your mortgage payment, the argument you had with your partner this morning, the strange noise your car is making. And what is your body doing? The exact same thing as the zebras. That same ancient, powerful survival response kicks into gear. The same hormones flood your system. Your heart rate climbs. Your blood pressure rises. The problem is, there's no lion. There's no running for your life. You're just sitting there, stewing in a cocktail of stress hormones originally designed for a frantic, physical sprint. And you don't do it for 3 minutes. You do it for the 30-minute traffic jam. You do it again when your boss looks at you funny. You do it for weeks when you're worried about a deadline. This is the central, earth-shattering question at the heart of Robert M. Sapolsky's masterpiece, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. This book, written by a brilliant neuroscientist and primatologist from Stanford University, isn't just a book, it's a revelation. It has sold millions of copies and has fundamentally changed the way we understand the relationship between our minds and our bodies. Sapolsky asks a simple question with a profound answer. Why do we, in our modern, comfortable lives, suffer from an epidemic of diseases like heart disease, diabetes, and ulcers, while wild animals, who face constant life or death threats, don't? The answer is the secret I'm going to share with you today. By the end of our time together, you will understand the hidden language your body uses to respond to the world. You'll see how your thoughts and feelings can directly influence the health of virtually every cell you possess. And most importantly, you will learn why some of us are crushed by stress, while others seem to thrive, and what you can do to join the second group. This isn't just about managing stress, it's about understanding the very blueprint of your own biology, and learning how to stop turning your own mind into your body's worst enemy. So, let's begin our journey into one of the most important books you will ever encounter. Book Summary. To truly grasp the genius of Sapolsky's work, we have to start with a single, simple concept that you probably learned in a science class and promptly forgot: homeostasis. It's a beautiful idea. It means that our bodies have an ideal state, a perfect temperature, a perfect blood sugar level, a perfect pH balance. When something knocks us out of that balance, our body works to bring it back. If you get too hot, you sweat to cool down. If your blood sugar drops, you get hungry. Homeostasis is about staying in balance. A zebra running from a lion is knocked violently out of homeostatic balance. Its body's response? That flood of hormones? That racing heart? Is what Sapolsky calls the stress response. It's what the body does to reestablish balance, to survive the crisis. For the vast majority of creatures on this planet, stress is about a short-term, acute physical crisis. After it's over, you're either fine or you're lunch. But we humans have a unique and terrible talent. We can turn on that very same stress response, that same life or death survival mechanism, just with our thoughts. As Sapolsky puts it, we are smart enough to generate all sorts of stressful events purely in our heads. 47. How many zebras lie awake at night worrying about their retirement plans or what they're going to say on a first date? This is the core of the problem. Our physiological systems are superbly adapted for dealing with short-term physical emergencies. But they are a potential disaster when provoked chronically for purely psychological reasons. When we sit around and worry, we are turning on a system designed to help us outrun a predator, but we're doing it for months on end over mortgages, relationships, and promotions. This is the central mantra of the book, the idea we'll return to again and again. We so often activate a physiological system that has evolved for responding to acute physical emergencies, but we turn it on for months on end, worrying about things that make no sense to a zebra. So, what is this system? What is the machinery of the stress response? It starts with your brain. Specifically, a part of your nervous system you don't consciously control, the autonomic nervous system. This system has two opposing branches, like a gas pedal and a brake for your body. The brake is the parasympathetic nervous system. It's in charge of all the calm, quiet, vegetative activities. When you're resting after a big meal, feeling happily drowsy, that's your parasympathetic system at work, helping you store energy and grow. It's the rest and digest system. The gas pedal is the sympathetic nervous system. This is the one that kicks into high gear during what Sapolsky calls the 4 F's: flight, fight, fright, and, well, sex. 104. When you're startled, or thrilled, or terrified, this system floods your body with two critical chemical messengers, epinephrine and norepinephrine. You probably know them by their more common names, adrenaline and noradrenaline. 104. 105. Within seconds of perceiving a threat, real or imagined, these chemicals are released, causing your heart to pound, your stomach to clutch, and your body to prepare for intense action. That's the lightning-fast response. But there's another, slightly slower and more sustained part of the system. This is the hormonal cascade. It also starts in the brain, in a region called the hypothalamus. When you're stressed, the hypothalamus releases a hormone called CRH. 136. This travels a tiny distance to the pituitary gland, telling it to release another hormone, ACTH. 136. ACTH then travels through your bloodstream down to your adrenal glands, which sit on top of your kidneys. And this is where the second star of the stress show is released, a class of steroid hormones called glucocorticoids. 130. In humans, the main one is cortisol. Adrenaline provides the explosive energy for the first few seconds of the crisis. Glucocorticoids come in to sustain the response over minutes or hours. 130. Together, adrenaline and glucocorticoids are the workhorses of the stress response. 136. So what do they actually do? Their primary job is to mobilize energy. When you're running for your life, your muscles need fuel, and they need it now. You don't have time to digest that last meal. So, these hormones act like frantic bank tellers, liquidating your body's assets. They pull stored energy, in the form of simple sugars like glucose and fats, out of your liver, muscles, and fat cells and pour them into the bloodstream so they can be delivered to the muscles that need them. 63. At the same time, your heart rate and blood pressure skyrocket to deliver that fuel as fast as possible. 64. And to make sure all this energy goes to the right places, your body shuts down all long-term, optimistic projects. Digestion stops. Growth is halted. The reproductive system goes offline. If a lion is on your tail, it's not the time to worry about ovulating or making sperm. 64. Even your immune system is suppressed. The logic seems to be, worry about fighting off an infection later. Right now, you need to survive the next 5 minutes. 65. This is a brilliant, life-saving system for an acute emergency. But here's where we get into trouble. What happens when this system is turned on constantly? What happens when every day is an emergency? Sapolsky uses a wonderful analogy: the two elephants on a seesaw model. 73. Imagine two small kids balancing on a seesaw. This is your body in a state of calm balance, or allostasis. The low levels of stress hormones are easy to manage. Now, imagine trying to balance that same seesaw with two massive elephants. It's possible, with great effort, but it comes at a huge cost. The elephants consume enormous energy just staying balanced, energy that could be used for more useful projects. 74. They wear out the seesaw much faster. 75. This is what happens when you are chronically stressed. Your body is constantly spending energy just to maintain a precarious balance, and the systems themselves start to wear down under the immense load. This wear and tear is what Sapolsky calls allostatic load. 75. It's not that the stress response runs out of fuel. It's that the response itself, if chronically activated, becomes more damaging than the stressor it's trying to protect you from. 70. And this is the key to understanding a vast range of modern diseases. Let's take a tour of the body and see what happens when the elephants are on the seesaw for too long. We'll start with the cardiovascular system. During an emergency, your blood pressure rises to pump fuel to your muscles. This is adaptive. But if your blood pressure is hitting 180/100 every time you get an annoying email, you are heading for disaster. 71. Chronic hypertension is the first step. To handle that constant pressure, the walls of your blood vessels have to work harder, so they build up thicker muscle. But this makes them more rigid, which in turn increases blood pressure even more. It's a vicious cycle. 163. Your heart also suffers. With blood returning to it with more force, the wall of the left ventricle, the part that pumps blood to the body, thickens. This is called left ventricular hypertrophy, and it's the single best predictor of cardiac risk. 164. Meanwhile, those high-pressure torrents of blood start to damage the smooth inner lining of your arteries, especially at the points where they branch. Think of a river fork, where the water churns most violently. These tiny tears and craters create an inflammatory response. Fatty nutrients, cholesterol, and other circulating gunk start to stick to these damaged sites, forming what we know as atherosclerotic plaques. 165. Stress helps build these plaques by both damaging the vessel walls and, as we saw, by dumping more fat and bad cholesterol LDL into the bloodstream to begin with. 166. If a plaque grows large enough, it can block an artery. If it tears loose, it can travel to a smaller vessel and clog it completely. If that happens in an artery feeding the heart, you have a heart attack. If it happens in the brain, you have a stroke. 173. This explains why stress is a major contributor to heart disease, the #1 killer in the developed world. It's not some vague psychological notion, it's a direct mechanical process of wear and tear. Now, let's look at energy. We've seen that the stress response is all about mobilizing energy. But if you're constantly mobilizing energy at the cost of storing it, you're always running on empty. You'll fatigue more easily. 71. And there's a deeper problem. All that glucose and fat floating around in your bloodstream needs to be put away. The hormone that does this is insulin. But what happens during stress? Glucocorticoids make your body's cells less sensitive to insulin. 243 They are essentially telling the cells, don't store this energy, we need it now. If this happens chronically, your cells can become permanently less responsive to insulin. This is called insulin resistance. Your pancreas has to pump out more and more insulin to get the job done. This is the pathway to adult onset, or type 2, diabetes, a disease that is reaching epidemic proportions in our modern world. 248 Sapolsky points out that this isn't a normal feature of aging. It's a disease of inactivity and surplus fat, conditions common in our society. 248. This combination of high blood pressure, elevated blood sugar and insulin, and too much bad cholesterol is so common that it has a name, metabolic syndrome, or Syndrome X. 253 It's a perfect storm of stress-related problems, a clear sign that the elephants have been on the seesaw for far too long. What about our digestive system? When you're running from a lion, the last thing your body wants to do is waste energy on digestion. So it shuts down. Saliva stops flowing, your mouth gets dry. 286 Stomach contractions halt. Blood flow is diverted away from the gut. 286 This is fine for a short sprint. But what happens with chronic stress? This brings us to the titular question of the book, ulcers. For decades, ulcers were the poster child for stress-related disease. The story was simple: you worry a lot, your stomach churns out acid, and you burn a hole in your stomach lining. Then, in the 1980s, two Australian scientists discovered a bacterium called Helicobacter pylori and showed that it was present in the vast majority of ulcer patients. 296. The medical world did a complete reversal. Ulcers weren't caused by stress, they were caused by a bug. The stress idea was dismissed as unscientific, psychosomatic nonsense. 297. But, as Sapolsky masterfully explains, the story is more complex. The bacterium can't be the whole story. Why? Because only about 10% of people infected with H. pylori actually get ulcers. 297 Something else must be involved. That something else is stress. It turns out that stress doesn't cause ulcers by increasing acid. In fact, during a stressor, acid secretion actually decreases as digestion shuts down. 299 The damage happens in a more subtle way. The stomach is constantly protecting itself from its own acid with a thick layer of mucus and other defenses. During chronic stress, the body cuts back on these expensive defense and repair projects. 299. Then, when the stress is over and digestion rebounds, the stomach's defenses are down. It's like firing up the furnace with the firewalls weakened. Stress, combined with the presence of the H. pylori bacterium, creates the perfect conditions for an ulcer to form. The bacteria might load the gun, but stress often pulls the trigger. Stress also plays a major role in another common gut problem, irritable bowel syndrome, or IBS. 290 While stress shuts down the stomach and small intestine, it actually increases contractions in the large intestine. The logic is simple. If you're running for your life, you want to jettison any dead weight. 289. But if this happens chronically, you get a spastic colon, leading to the pain, diarrhea, and bloating of IBS. 290. Let's move on to two other long-term projects that stress puts on hold: growth and reproduction. It takes a huge amount of energy to grow. So, during a crisis, growth is one of the first things to go. 306 This is why children who experience extreme, prolonged psychological trauma, severe abuse or neglect, can literally stop growing. This rare but devastating condition is called stress dwarfism or psychosocial dwarfism. 317. These children aren't malnourished. Their bodies simply shut down the hormones needed for growth, like growth hormone itself. 325. The stories Sapolsky tells are heartbreaking, like that of the famous author J.M. Barrie, who created Peter Pan, the boy who never grew up. Barrie himself stopped growing after the traumatic death of his older brother, in a tragic, unconscious attempt to please his grieving mother who wished her dead son could have remained a boy forever. 329. These extreme cases show how profoundly our emotional state can dictate our physical development. Reproduction is another optimistic, energy-intensive project that gets shut down by stress. In both men and women, the cascade of reproductive hormones, starting with LHRH from the brain, is inhibited. 345. 356 glucocorticoids block the testes in men and the ovaries in women from responding properly to their hormonal signals. 350. 358. In men, testosterone levels drop. 345. But the more immediate effect is on erections. An erection requires the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system, to be active. You have to be calm and relaxed. 348. If you're anxious or stressed, the sympathetic fight or flight system takes over, making an erection difficult to achieve or maintain. This is why psychogenic impotency is so common. 351. In women, stress can disrupt the menstrual cycle, making it irregular or stopping it altogether. 358. It can also interfere with ovulation and make it harder for a fertilized egg to implant in the uterus. 358. Libido decreases in both sexes. 362. From an evolutionary perspective, this all makes sense. A time of famine or crisis is not a good time to bring a new life into the world. So far, we've seen stress attack our heart, our metabolism, our gut, our growth, and our reproductive systems. But what about our immune system? The old simple story was that stress suppresses immunity. Cellier saw this in his original experiments. His stressed rats had shrunken immune tissues. 54. But again, the reality is far more nuanced and fascinating. In the first few minutes of a stressor, something surprising happens. Many aspects of your immune system are actually enhanced. 387. Your body rushes immune cells into circulation and sends them to the front lines, your skin, your gut, your lungs, the places where a wound or infection is most likely to occur during a physical crisis. This is what Sapolsky calls Phase A. It's like your body is anticipating an injury and beefing up its defenses at the borders. If the stressor continues for about an hour or so, the system shifts. The prolonged exposure to glucocorticoids starts to suppress the immune response, bringing it back down to baseline. This is Phase B. 388. This is also adaptive. An immune system that's always on high alert is dangerous. It can start attacking your own body, leading to autoimmune diseases. The glucocorticoids act as a brake, preventing the system from overreacting. But what if the stressor is major and prolonged? Then you enter Phase C. The immune system is suppressed below baseline. 388. This is where chronic stress can increase your vulnerability to infectious diseases, like the common cold. It's why latent viruses, like herpes, tend to flare up when you're run down. The virus is smart. It waits for your immune defenses to be weakened before it makes its move. 409. This three-phase model helps explain a major paradox. Stress hormones like glucocorticoids are used to treat autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis because they suppress the overactive immune system. Yet, stress is also known to worsen flare-ups of these same diseases. 394. How can this be? The new model suggests an answer. Massive, prolonged stress or high doses of glucocorticoids push you into Phase C, suppressing the autoimmune attack. But frequent, intermittent stressors, the kind that repeatedly kick you into Phase A and B, may actually ratchet the immune system upward, making it more likely to overreact and cause a flare-up. 395. Now, what about the most feared disease of all, cancer? Does stress cause cancer? Sapolsky is extremely careful and clear here. The answer, based on the best scientific evidence, is almost certainly no. 413. While animal studies show that stress can accelerate the growth of some induced tumors, there is no good evidence from large prospective human studies that stress increases the risk of getting cancer in the first place. 413. What about once someone has cancer? Can stress management or a positive attitude affect survival? This is one of the most controversial topics in medicine. A famous study by David Spiegel at Stanford seemed to show that women with metastatic breast cancer who participated in support groups lived, on average, 18 months longer. 409. But subsequent studies have had a very hard time replicating this finding. 409. Sapolsky issues a powerful warning here against the dangerous idea that if you get cancer, it's somehow your fault for not having the right attitude, and that you can cure yourself with positive thinking. This kind of blame the victim mentality, popularized by writers like Bernie Siegel, is not only scientifically unsupported but can be incredibly cruel and damaging to people facing a devastating illness. 421, 422. Finally, we arrive at the brain itself. How does stress affect our ability to think and remember? Here again, we see that familiar dual-edged sword. A mild, short-term stressor can actually enhance memory. 451. Think of flashbulb memories. Those vivid, indelible moments like your first kiss or where you were on September 11th. The adrenaline released during these arousing events helps to sear the memory into your brain, particularly in a key memory structure called the hippocampus. 461. This is adaptive. If something important and arousing happens, you want to remember it. But when stress becomes severe or prolonged, the opposite happens. High, sustained levels of glucocorticoids begin to disrupt the function of the hippocampus. 468. They interfere with the process of long-term potentiation, which is how neural connections are strengthened to form memories. 468. The retrieval of existing memories becomes harder. This is why you blank out on an exam when you're panicked, or can't remember someone's name at a party. 453. Even more disturbingly, Sapolsky's own pioneering research has shown that prolonged, intense exposure to glucocorticoids can actually damage and kill neurons in the hippocampus. 473. In rats, this happens during normal aging, creating a vicious cycle. As the hippocampus degenerates, it becomes less effective at shutting off the glucocorticoid response, which leads to even more glucocorticoids, which causes more hippocampal damage. 516. Is there evidence for this in humans? Yes. People with conditions that cause massive glucocorticoid excess, like Cushing's syndrome, show both memory problems and a smaller hippocampus. 473. Similar findings have been reported in people with long-term major depression and post-traumatic stress disorder (PTSD). 474. While the science is still evolving, the implications are chilling. Chronic stress may not just make it harder to think, it may actually damage the parts of our brain responsible for learning and memory. And this brings us to the final, critical piece of the puzzle. We've seen in detail how stress makes us sick. But why are some situations so much more stressful than others? Why do some of us fall apart, while others remain resilient? This is where Sapolsky shifts from pure physiology to the psychology of stress, and it's where the keys to managing stress are found. A series of brilliant experiments, many conducted by a physiologist named J. Weiss, revealed the core psychological ingredients that make a situation stressful. 524. Imagine two rats in separate cages. Both receive the same series of mild, unpredictable electric shocks. The first rat gets an ulcer. The second rat does not. What's the difference? The second rat has a bar of wood in its cage that it can chew on whenever it gets shocked. It has an outlet for frustration. 524. Or, in another variation, it has another rat it can bite. This is displacement of aggression, a stress reducer we primates are notoriously good at. 525. Another variable. A warning bell sounds just before each shock for one rat but not the other. The rat with the bell gets fewer ulcers. Why? Predictability. 528. It learns not only when something bad is about to happen, but also, crucially, when it can relax because nothing bad is happening. Next, a sense of control. A rat that believes it can press a lever to stop the shocks even if a lever is disconnected has a much smaller stress response than a rat that has no control. It's the belief in control, not the actual control, that matters. 531. Another factor is social support. Put a primate through something stressful, and the stress response is smaller if a friend is present. 526. Sapolsky's own research on baboons shows that males with strong social bonds, those who groom females and play with infants, have lower resting glucocorticoid levels. 600. Finally, there's the perception of things worsening. A rat getting 25 shocks an hour feels much better about it if it was getting 50 shocks yesterday. The same external reality can be perceived as good news or bad news, and that perception dramatically changes the physiological response. 534. These psychological factors, outlets, predictability, control, social support, and a sense of improvement, are the building blocks of psychological stress. And our personalities are, in many ways, our habitual styles of interpreting the world through these filters. Some personalities are magnets for stress. The Type A personality, competitive, impatient, and hostile, is a classic example. It's not the hard-working nature of Type A's that's the problem. It's the chronic hostility. 612. Hostile people see threats and provocations everywhere. They live in a world that constantly demands a stress response, and their cardiovascular systems pay the price. Anxiety disorders are another example. Anxious people have a hyperreactive amygdala, the brain's fear center. 609. They overestimate risk and are in a constant state of vigilance, with an overactive sympathetic nervous system. And then there is depression, which Sapolsky presents as the ultimate stress-related disease. It's a state of learned helplessness, born from an experience of uncontrollable stress, where the body's stress response system is profoundly broken. 581. In many depressives, glucocorticoid levels are chronically elevated, and the brain has lost its ability to shut them off. 574. It's a state of physiological exhaustion from a battle being fought entirely within the mind. This finally brings us to the grandest scale of all, society. If psychological factors are so important, what does your place in society have to do with stress? A tremendous amount. Sapolsky argues that if you want to find the human equivalent of a low-ranking baboon, relentlessly stressed by those higher up, look at a poor person in a wealthy society. 663. Poverty is not just about a lack of resources, it's a profound chronic stressor. It comes with a constant lack of control, a lack of predictability, fewer outlets, and less social support. 664, 665. The result is a staggering health gradient based on socioeconomic status (SES). On nearly every measure, from heart disease to infant mortality, the lower you are on the SES ladder, the worse your health. 666. This isn't just about the poor versus the rich. It's a gradient. At every single step down the ladder, health gets a little bit worse. This has been shown in countries with universal health care, like Britain, which means it's not just about access to doctors. 669. What is it about then? It's not just about being poor. It's about feeling poor. 673. It's about your subjective rank, how you perceive yourself in relation to others. And it's about poverty amid plenty. The greater the income inequality in a society, the worse the average health of its citizens, And this applies to both the poor and the rich. 676. 679. Why? Because large inequalities erode social trust, increase hostility, and create a more stressful environment for everyone. This is a sobering, powerful message. The architecture of our society can literally get under our skin and shape our health. So, after this long journey through the many ways stress can break us down, are we doomed? Is there any hope? Absolutely. And this is where Sapolsky leaves us, not with a simple fix, but with a deep sense of wisdom. Commentary. The incredible message of why zebras don't get ulcers is not one of despair, but one of empowerment. For 17 chapters, Robert Sapolsky takes us on a detailed, often terrifying tour of what can go wrong in our bodies. He shows us how a system designed for our survival can, in the modern world, turn against us. But in doing so, he gives us the map. He reveals the mechanisms. And if you understand the mechanism, you can begin to influence it. The most profound lesson in this book, for me, is the realization that we are not built for the world we have built. We are running ancient software on modern hardware, and the result is a system crash. We have the physiology of a wild animal, but the psychology of a worried, self-aware human. That mismatch is the source of so much of our suffering. But knowledge is power. The final chapter of the book is about managing stress, and it's not about finding some magic bullet. It's about applying the psychological principles we've learned. It's about consciously and intentionally building more control, more predictability, more outlets, and more social support into our lives. So what can you do, starting today, to apply these lessons? It doesn't have to be complicated. First, find a domain of control. Your life might feel overwhelming, full of things you can't change. But find one small corner of it where you can exert mastery. It could be as simple as organizing your desk, starting a small garden, or mastering a new skill. That feeling of efficacy, of being in charge of something, can be a powerful antidote to the feeling of helplessness that fuels so much stress. Second, strengthen your social connections. Don't just network, connect. Reach out to a friend you haven't spoken to in a while. Make time for family. Sapolsky's baboons teach us a vital lesson: social grooming, playing with the young, having allies. These are not frivolous activities. They are biological necessities. In our human world, that translates to listening, offering support, and allowing ourselves to be supported. A key insight is that giving support can be one of the most powerful stress reducers of all. Being needed is a profound source of control and purpose. Third, and perhaps most directly, find a physical outlet. The entire problem we've discussed is that we turn on a physical stress response for non-physical reasons. Exercise is the perfect solution. It gives your body the physical release it was preparing for. When you exercise, you are, in a sense, finally giving your body permission to do what it's been screaming to do all along. You're telling it, okay, here's the crisis you've been waiting for. Let's go. It doesn't just reduce tension, it completes the biological cycle. This book is a journey into the intricate and beautiful machinery of our own bodies. Robert Sapolsky is more than just a scientist, he is a master teacher, a storyteller who can explain the most complex ideas with wit, humanity, and profound wisdom. That was a summary of Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers by Robert Sapolsky. We've explored the highlights today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary can only take you so far. The real magic happens when you read the book yourself. It's in the quiet moments, when a particular story or a simple phrase hits you in a way you didn't expect. This summary is designed to help you decide if this book is worth your time. If anything we've talked about today has resonated with you, grab a copy, because reading it isn't just learning, it's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see yourself in your daily life. You'll find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, I'd be so grateful if you would hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It lets me know that these explorations matter, and ensures you won't miss our next adventure into another life-changing book. Let's keep learning and growing together.